enough, you're probably aware, I lost my mom 3 weeks ago as at the shooting of this video, and that's why we are not yet back to regular programming. As I said in my last video, I'm gonna use every one of these experiences as a learning opportunity, and I'm just hoping, because this is something that, even though it's not part of our regular programming, it's not part of the regular videos I shoot, death is something that affects all of us in one way or another. And for me, this is like the closest I've ever come to the death of a family member. Fortunately, we have never had a nuclear family member die until when my mom passed away. So that's why this is very important to me. And for those who are probably wondering, why do you keep talking about your mom? This is a travel channel. Why are you talking about her? So actually, I owe this channel to my mom. She actually owns the copyright for the name of this channel. She is the one who named the channel, and not just this channel only, all my other Ivam Tali channels, including my website. My mom is the one who named them, so I think I just owe it to her. I will keep talking about her for as long as I think will be helpful for me, especially through the grieving process. So my apologies in advance if it gets too emotional, or if let's say it's not part of what you're expecting. Just allow me to say some things, yeah? So first of all, I will start with what happened to me, like how I learned about my mom's death, yeah? So it's not the best way I ever imagined I would ever learn about my mom's death. I always imagined probably so, because my mom always had she had heart problems for a very long time, since 2009, when she was diagnosed with I think it's called angina or something like that. 2009. At the time, I was so prepared for her death. Like, I was not even, when we took her to India, I was not even sure if she was gonna come back alive, because at the time, if you remember from my last video, her left pulmonary, they call it ventricle, valve, something, one of the left side was 95% blocked. And the right side, so when we went back, I think about 6 years later, they found the right side was 75% blocked. So back then, like, I was so prepared of her death. Like, I was so prepared if anything happened. But now when she eventually died, my mom was very fine. She died on the 5th morning at around 2 a.m. in the morning. She was not sick. She was, in fact, the day before, she had gone to, so my mom, so for context, my mom lives, she lives by herself in Kisumu. Kisumu is about, if you take a flight, it's about 45 minutes from Nairobi. If you go by road, I think it's about 6, 7, 8 hours by road. And she lives by herself. My dad lives in Malindi, which is like, I don't know, maybe 600 kilometers away. I don't know how, but they're really like far apart. One is a little on the southern part, the other one is like on the western part. So coincidentally, the night or the morning when my mom died, they were both together. They had traveled to the village house. So because of my mom's medical condition, they decided to move to Kisumu, which was a larger town. They built their house there because it would be easier to find medical help and all that stuff, in case she needed to, get emergency help. So the hospitals are bigger, there's more physicians and stuff like that. So that was the plan and the reason why they decided to move and live in Kisumu. But coincidentally, the morning when my mom died, both my parents had traveled to the village. They had traveled like on the Friday. So on Saturday, my mom decided to go and visit her sisters. They have like, I think, a chama or something. So this chama, they decided to meet in Homa Bay. Homa Bay is about, I think, 2 hours from Kisumu. They went to their chama and she even stayed there overnight. So the next day in the morning, she called my dad and my dad came and visited her. Not visit, and picked her up. and they went home. That was around maybe 6 o'clock, I think. They're about in the evening, and they went home. So she even cooked, they ate, and then they slept. So at around 2 a.m. in the morning, my mom just breathed. She just did just that, and that was it. So the road to our place it's a very rough road. It's not tarmac or anything. So my dad tried to like take her to the hospital just to try if they can do like CPR on her. They tried and it wasn't possible. So I actually watched the clip of when they were doing the CPR on my mom. And interestingly, my mom, she was just really happy. So she was very gentle, humble, and she was like literally smiling through that. She wasn't even like in pain or anything. So interestingly, so how did I learn? So this is like the 5th of September. And this is the morning when Kenya had just had their elections, I think 2 weeks earlier. And this morning they were supposed to announce the results for the Supreme Court. So this is now like 2 a.m.-ish, 3 a.m.-ish. My dad has tried to take her to the hospital. They've tried CPR, nothing works. So immediately he calls my siblings. So there's two of my siblings who live in Kenya. So he calls them, and fortunately for them, they had their phones on. He tries to call me. So usually for me, my phone is always on silent for some reason. And so my dad called all my siblings, tells them the news is what has happened. This is like almost 3-ish in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning. So for me, because my phone is off, I don't get to know the information. I'm not aware. So I continue sleeping because it's the next day. It was a Monday. So it was that morning, 5th, we're gonna know what the Supreme Court ruling was. But I had planned to I was going to buy some cars for my office. So I had planned like to have like not a very early start to the day. I wasn't gonna go to the gym that day again because of Supreme Court and all these kind of things. So usually I would be up by 6 o'clock, but on this day, by 7 o'clock, I was still in bed. So remember, everybody already has learned about the death by 3 a.m.-ish, 4 a.m.-ish, except me. So when I wake up in the morning, remember my phone is on silent. So when I wake up in the morning, I realize it's so bright because it's 7 o'clock and I just want to check, Kwani, what time is it? Like I've been sleeping for too long. So I check my phone, I find so many missed calls. So many, I think there was like 50 missed calls and so many messages. So I see one message on my phone and I'm like, okay, I need to respond to this message. Somebody was telling me, I don't know which uncle or auntie of mine is around. So I wanted to check that message. Then I realized I didn't have airtime. So I went to my other phone. I didn't even check. I went to my other phone because I have Wi-Fi in the house. So I decided to put on my Wi-Fi. And when I put on the Wi-Fi, you can imagine, the moment you put on the Wi-Fi and you have a lot of WhatsApp messages, so suddenly they all started coming in, like they're flowing in like crazy. You know, like if you haven't been out of Wi-Fi for a very long time and then you start and go on Wi-Fi, so that is what happened. So many of these messages are just like streaming in and I'm like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. So I decided to wait until all the messages had come in and then to read the first message. And when I went to read the first message, oh my God. So once all the messages had come in, WhatsApp now organizes the messages alphabetically. So I have one of my cousins, her name starts with A. For her, she already knew the information. And she didn't know that so when she got the news, whatever AM it was, so she assumed everybody knows about the information. So because her name was the top, I decided to start with her message because there were so many messages and I assumed people were just talking about Supreme Court or something. And interestingly, most of my family members were supporting a certain candidate, but I was supporting a different candidate. So I assumed maybe there was something about the Supreme Court ruling and everybody just wants to share with me that information. And so I decided, let me go alphabetically because that's how the WhatsApp messages are arranged. And I opened the first message. It's from my cousin. She's like, I'm sorry for what happened to your mom, my condolences. And I'm like, so I text her back and I'm like, what happened to my mom? This is like 7-ish. So I asked her what happened to my mom. She's like, oops, sorry, wrong number. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's a wrong, yeah, because she said it was a wrong number. And then I opened the next message. My sister is saying, oh, uncle, whoever is here, blah, blah, blah. So I am like, so I tried to text her back. I don't have airtime. So I decided to go to her house and check. Then I find the uncle is there, and that's how the message is broken. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about when you lose a parent, something that no one tells you about, is the confusion that comes with it. So I always had it in my head how I always imagined how, let's say if my mom died, how, or my dad or anyone, how I would mourn them. But I was so confused when this happened. So when they even told me that my mom had died, like I didn't even cry or do anything. I just went back to my house. And interestingly, the first thing that I wanted to do, I just found my school, it was in the morning, I went to the shower. Like all this time I haven't even cried or anything. So I went to the shower and I started running the water. And then in the process of showering, so I'm crying in the shower, but I'm also taking my shower. And then I remember something my mom used to say, that it's a saying in my mother tongue. It's about, let's say when you have a funeral, if it's your person who's dead, usually you do not even think about anything. You're just worried about what happened. But if it's like a neighbor's, there's a saying in my mother tongue that if it's a neighbor's funeral, you even have time to go and make a kitenge, you know? It's just to say that when it's suffering from your neighbor, it's not as painful as when it's yours. And when I remembered that saying, my mom used to say it's maberbere, you know, kitenge. It's just like if it's your neighbor's pain, you even have time to go and make, a kitenge is this African fabric. Like you even have time to go and make a proper dress for the funeral because it's not yours. So in this context, there I was, I've just got the news my mom has died and I'm in the shower. And then I just burst out laughing because I was like, oh my God, like I'm doing the exact same thing my mom used to say. But that is what comes with when you learn of the news of the death of your parent, like you're not even sure how to react. You don't even know how to mourn. You don't know how to do anything, but just do whatever works for you. If you feel like crying, just cry. If you want to do whatever you want to do, just do it. And then something else that I learned that no one tells you when your parent dies is, so I'm actually currently I'm 43. So I always imagine like if my mom died, maybe it wouldn't be as painful as, let's say, if I was maybe 5 years old, for example. Yeah. So there's this thought that, oh, because I'm much older, maybe it won't be as bad or as painful. Hey, but guys, let me tell you, it doesn't matter. In fact, I think even if you're 100, it doesn't matter. Like pain is pain. When you lose your parent, it doesn't matter how old you are. It still stings. Like you don't even realize that you're this old person. Like I was just like, how could my mom leave her child? You know, like I couldn't even, like I was seeing myself as her child. I wasn't seeing myself as this 43-year-old who has lost a parent. I was just seeing like this child, her mom has died. Like it doesn't matter how old you are, you still feel that pain. And then the other thing no one tells you when you lose your parent is like you find yourself doing things you never even imagined. Like I'm that person, I hate hospitals. Not because of anything, I just fear hospitals. Yeah, because they just scream sadness and sick people and death and all that, like just that dark cloud that covers hospitals. Like I hate medicine. Like I just hate anything that is painful or depicts pain to the human body. But when my mom died, so we buried her after 2 weeks. So all this time, I remember like some of my siblings used to go to the mortuary every other day to just look at the body. But me, I was like, I don't want to go to the mortuary. I don't want to have, I had decided I wasn't going to view her body because I didn't want to have like any negative image of her. I just wanted my subconscious memory to have the good things we shared together, the beautiful memories. But on the last day, the day now when we're taking the body out of the morgue, I remember for some reason there was the mortician was like, hey, I want people to come and confirm that this body is Lynette, is the body, yeah, that is being taken. I want people who are close to this family. But one condition, I don't want people who are going to come here and start crying and wailing and whatever, you know. So I decided to be the one, because I'd never gone to see my mom all this time. So I decided to go in there. Hey, you guys. Mortuaries are something else. It was a good mortuary, very clean, like there wasn't even a stench or anything, but it wasn't like, I couldn't imagine all these freezers with human bodies and all that. But yeah, I found myself in one. Like, that's what happens when you lose your parent. Like, you find yourself doing things you never even imagined. Yeah. And then something else I learned when you lose a parent is you know, like the amount of love that people show you. Like, I was surprised. I have a very small circle of friends, probably. I think in my whole family, we even had like a WhatsApp group, and I think I'm the one who had like 3 friends or something. But I was so shocked by the amount of love that people show you when you lose your loved one. Like, you'll be surprised. Like, there are all these people who, like, you've never even interacted with them like in a long time or in forever, but suddenly they'll be sending you messages of, you know, condolences messages, and the others will be making phone calls. People will be sending you money and all this kind, like people you didn't even expect. And one thing that really touched my heart is, so at the funeral day, we had decided to work with white flowers for my mom's grave. But incidentally, there was this one bouquet of roses. It was red, and I was so sure this wasn't part of the one we had ordered. And so when we were now putting the flowers on the grave, and they brought all these flowers, this was the odd flower out. It was a bouquet, but it was a red bouquet. So I was so sure this wasn't part of what we had ordered. And it was written St. Lucy's. So we all kept asking each other, who is this St. Lucy's? Like, where is this bouquet from? And you know, I personally, on 2 occasions, I have attended funerals, and only to find myself I was in the wrong funeral. So we kept saying that this probably is a stray mourner, was probably going to a different funeral, and they found themselves in our funeral, and they had flowers, and they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna put it here. But about 3 days ago, when we were going through my mom's phone, my dad finds that, so my mom, you know, like there can be a school, like let's say it's called St. Mary Moy Girls. So you only know the name Moy Girls, but you don't know it's also called St. Mary's. So apparently my mom was an alumni of this school, St. Lucy's. I can't remember the other name. It has another name, but that's the only name we knew about it. We knew it with, but she was an alumni in 1973. So when going through her phone, my dad found that she was in a WhatsApp group with these other ladies that they went to school with in 1973, and they were in a WhatsApp group. So we find they had been trying to write a tribute for her, and that's how we actually knew that she was in that WhatsApp group. So they wrote very beautiful. I was just looking at the tribute they had written. I think one of them had planned to come for the funeral. They probably came, and maybe they were going to speak. So when we found it on them, they were trying to write the tribute in case they were asked to speak at my mom's funeral. It was a beautiful tribute. And it just really touched our hearts that people that were with my mom in 1973, that was 39 years ago, actually came to mourn her. And we didn't even know that they were there. But the flowers came, and we thank you so much for that. This is just one example. So when we were going through her phone, that's when we actually realized there are all these people who also loved her in equal measure, and we didn't even know about them, but they came for her funeral. But on the flip side, you'll also be surprised that the mean people will also continue being mean. So something that surprised me, I always imagined like when you get bereaved, people suddenly, you know, start liking you, or maybe they would have some empathy. Okay, at least that's what I do when I know people are bereaved. I have extra grace for them, extra patience, because I haven't walked in their shoes, so I really don't know, but I just imagine it's painful. And that's what I thought. But I was surprised that the devil and his agents, they don't stop working. When your parent dies, they will continue working. And I've talked about this in my previous video. There's this lady who actually offered us event management for the funeral. She did a very, very shoddy job. Like, from the tents, she had zero empathy. Like, she gave us very dirty tents. We even mentioned this to her. She didn't care to even change them. She gave us leaking tents. And one incident that comes to mind, I remember we had a payment plan and she wanted her money, I think 80% upfront. So when the money was sent to her, like around 2 p.m.-ish, money was sent to her via, I think, Pesalink. And then a confirmation message was sent to her, and you know, she never got back to any of us, so we assumed the money went to her. But incidentally, for some reason, the money never went through. But she never mentioned until 4 a.m. in the morning, when my mom was supposed to be buried. She calls my brother, hey, I haven't been paid. 4 a.m. Remember, the confirmation was sent the day before around 1 p.m. She waits until the day of the funeral, 4 a.m. in the morning. She's calling, hey, money. I'm like, oh my God, like she couldn't even wait for just 3 hours, 7 a.m. and make a phone call. And this lady, I should have seen the red flags, because I remember my mom, news of my mom's death, I told you guys it was around, she died around 3 a.m. in the morning. By 10 a.m., this woman was already in my house selling her services to me. And because she's a widow, she sings in our church choir. She's always in front there. I assumed she was a very decent lady. And I was like, okay, she gets it. She understands. But she didn't care. Like, when somebody is mean, when they are mediocre in their services, they don't care whether you're crying, whether you're mourning, they're still going to give you bad service. So don't think that because your parent is dead, everyone's going to be nice. The bad people continue being bad. The nice people continue being nice. That's just how it happens. And then something else I learned is that when your parent dies, it's like, you probably have heard, like when, let's say if somebody dies in the US and the body is being shipped to Kenya or vice versa, they usually label it as cargo without value, charge no duty. I literally saw my mom's value diminish completely. Yeah, you've probably already heard this saying, what's in a name? So when my mom died, she was called Lynette. Her name is Lynette Adongo. But the moment she lost her breath, they put like white, like elastoc, not elastoplast. Okay, they put like a white something they pasted on her forehead, and they put a number on it, 558. From that moment on, she was no longer Lynette. She was no longer Eve's mom. She was no longer anything. She was a number. And I know the Bible says that returns to that. And, you know, like it has never had more meaning. Like when my mom died, like I didn't realize the moment you lose your breath, you cease to be Eva. Like you're no longer a human being, just a piece of meat there. And that's how they refer to you. So even on this date, and immediately when she was taken to the morgue attendant now tells you, okay, I need this, I need that. You know, like they literally strip her naked. They strip you naked because you're no longer, you're just a piece of meat. They strip you naked, and then they just put like, they tell you to bring like a kanga or a lasso. They would just, you know, cover for dignity, but they strip you naked because you're no longer just a piece of meat. So on this day, I think about 4 days later, I wanted to find out some information from the mortician. And I'm like, hey, I want to find out information about Lynette. They're like, who is that? You know, because they don't call people by names in the mortuary. Once you're dead, they don't call you by names. So the interesting, when my mom died, they took her to the nearest hospital is a Christian mission hospital. So it's a Christian mission hospital. So because his dad was a pastor, he kind of knows his church people. So when they took her to the hospital, some of the pastors accompanied him. So the mortician was like, oh, that one, usually let one are pastors. Like, that's like the closest reference they would have to her. So he's like, oh, anyway, the next time you want to find out information about her, just call for number 558. Like, oh my God, I was just like, okay, she no longer ceases even to have a name. So that's the interesting bit. So, excuse me. So I think what I'm saying is, if your parents are still alive, yeah, just take advantage to enjoy them, enjoy their presence now when you still have them, because before you know it, they're gonna diminish. Like by the time you go to that grave, you don't even have a name, like you're just but a number. And then something else that no one tells you when you lose your parent, especially if you are in Africa. I know in other countries like in Europe, in North America, Canada, and the rest, they have like proper funeral, homes, funeral directors that manage the entire process for you, from getting the different services all the way to when you have to bury your loved one. Like they even do that for you. But here in Africa, like you have to handle that by yourself. By yourself, you have to talk about your family and all that. So nobody tells you about the need to strike a balance between your emotions and logic. Is because remember, you are hurting here, you have lost your loved one, you're crying and all, but those tears do not buy coffins, they don't dig graves, they don't pay mortuary bills, they don't do any of that. So you've lost your loved one, you're very emotional, but you still have to think straight, because at the end of it all, you still have to do these other things. Yeah, it's painful, they're dead, they're not gonna come back, but the coffin has to be bought, the grave has to be dug. If you're from Western Kenya, people have to eat, so you have to hire the caterer, you have to buy the tents. So this is something, and you still need your burial permit and your death certificate and all that. Tears don't do any of these things. So this was something that was very hard to learn. You have to strike that balance. You have to know, find your mourning, you're in pain, but these other things still have to be done. And it's very easy to find most people finding themselves leaning a lot on the emotional side and forgetting the other logistics that still have to happen to make sure that your parent gets a decent send-off. And the interesting bit, especially like in my case, I've already mentioned, my parents did not live, they did not live in my mom didn't live in the town where she died. She was living in Kisumu. But according to our Luo customs, you still have to be buried in the village. So, and since this was the first death we had in our nuclear family, like personally, I had never really have to handle like a death from beginning to end. So when it happened to my mom, it was also new to me. Like I didn't even know where people buy coffins. I didn't even know, like I had zero clue. And the same was for my siblings. So we had to learn a lot of things. We had to find out a lot of information. That's what happened, because ideally most times if we had like any of our uncles or our aunties passed on, like my parents would be like really at the forefront, because first of all, they were retired. My mom was retired and they live in the village. They have a lot more time. So they were more hands-on than we were. So when now this death came, we are like, oh my God, where do you even start from? Yeah. But it comes with the territory. Nobody tells you, but somehow, by God's grace, you figure it out. And then something else I also learned, nobody tells you when your parent dies, is how your parents lived their life and your relationship with them when they were alive really, really affects your grieving, especially if they are a Christian. So in my case, for example, my mom was a very God-fearing woman. She loved God so much, like she was constantly in her prayer mode and all that. So even when the grave was being, the body was being lowered, I had this lingering hope in my mind that there's a resurrection, yeah? And it was painful to watch her go down, but just the thought that there's a resurrection, there's a God who says, I am the father of the orphans, like that alone just made the grieving process so different for me. And I'm just imagining if, let's say, my mom wasn't a believer or I wasn't a believer, I don't even know how I was gonna, because you're so sure who you, there's no hope at all. But just that thought at the back of my mind that I know this person loves Jesus and God was there when this was happening, that alone gives me so much hope. And it keeps me going. Even on those sad moments, I know I can just turn to Jesus and things will get better. And also in terms of how much do you, when your parents are alive, it also affects your grieving process. Like, do you have so many unfinished businesses with them? And that's why, even for those who follow me on Facebook, I was like, my recent post, I said, strive to work hard and achieve, so that if your parents are still alive, so that they can see how much it was worth the sacrifices they made for you. Because Can you imagine a situation whereby you have to be grieving and at the same time you have regrets? Shoulda, woulda, So I guess what I'm saying is if your parents are still alive, take advantage. If it's a blessing you want to pass upon their lives, if it's just to make them smile, just show them how much you love them and whatever, just do it, because it's so tough when you have to be grieving and then you still have regrets. So for me, I was very close to my mom. We did a lot of things together. We traveled the world together. We did stuff together. We still had a lot of plans. But I am so confident that I gave her her flowers when she was still alive and she could say thank you. And even when she passed on, I have no regrets, like I would have done this, I should have said that. I really tried, especially in the past 7 years. I consciously made a point for her to really know that I love her. I think about her all the time. I try to make a point to visit her. Anytime I hear like she's sick, I am on the next plane just, to do all that. And, it makes the grieving process so much easier. And like, I cannot imagine if I had to be grieving and regretting at the same time. Like, grieving on its own is so difficult. It wears down on you, on your physical. I haven't worked out in 1 month now, because remember, first of all, I had my throat situation. After the throat situation, it was just dead. So like almost 1.5 weeks, I haven't worked out, but there's no tummy. Like, grieving, the grief process alone is heavy. It's a lot. You cannot imagine adding regrets to it. And then something else that nobody tells you is how things that you never thought about suddenly become reminders of your parent. So in my case, for example, for work purposes and, just because my mom lives in Kisumu, I used to do a lot of trips to Kisumu from Nairobi. And the way when the plane is just about to land, it usually makes it turns at Mamboleo. And my mom used to live in Mamboleo. So usually when the plane was just about to land, I would just be looking down and I would see our house. And sometimes I would, they say you should switch off your phone, but sometimes I wouldn't switch off my phone and I'd be like, hey mom, I can see you, or like text her and all that. But it wasn't a big deal. So anytime going to Kisumu, and that days like I'd go to Kisumu and not see her because maybe I'm proceeding to the next province or whatever. And it wasn't a big deal. But now, when my mom died, like that, when the news came, I had to fly to Kisumu and then travel to the village. My goodness, that was the hardest flight I have ever been on. Just going to, when we're landing, and then I was so sure that she's no longer there and she's never gonna come back. That was really, really heavy on me. Like, it was never like a big deal to land in Kisumu, but now knowing that you're landing and you're never, ever, ever gonna see her, that was really, really heavy. That is what happens. And then something else that no one tells you, you always keep forgetting, quote unquote, that your parent has died or your loved one. So for example, my mom originally she comes from Rusinga Island, and we've never really been like to her original home because they migrated, but she kind of had told us some of the names of the places where she came from. So last week, when my siblings and I went to Rusinga Island, and one of my siblings remembered the names of her clan, and it was on a billboard, probably a billboard. It was on maybe let's call it a billboard. And it's like, oh, look at mom's clan, blah blah blah. And then I took a picture. I'm like, oh, let me take a picture and send to her to surprise her. Then I remembered, oops, she's no longer here. So that is something you should expect. Okay, for me, it's been happening a lot. Sometimes I just go about my business and I even forget that my mom already died. And I see maybe like a meme or something, and I forward it to her phone. I remember, oops, she's no longer there. So there's those bouts of forgetfulness that comes in because you're also trying to balance going back to your normal life. You're trying to balance, someone is really calling me. You're trying to balance going back to your normal life with the grief, and then sometimes you end up forgetting. So like that is one incident. Like I took the picture, I'm like, oh, let me send mom and surprise her that we are here. Then I'm glad she wasn't there. And there are some memes I used to like I see, and the first person that comes to mind is her, and you're like, you forward to her number, and then that's when you're like, oh, she's no longer there. So there are all those things that keep happening. Sometimes you're scrolling on your phone, you want to make a phone call, and then you land on mom, then you realize she's no longer there. So I'm still battling with how to deal with that. How do you, like, do I like delete her number? Do I give it like a different name, like do not call? Or like, it's really hard, like no one prepares you for any of that. I think I have covered most of what I wanted to cover. I've talked about the constant reminders. So we have a family WhatsApp group, and my mom always, every morning, should send us a message. Hello, good morning, everyone. May Jehovah go ahead of you. And then in the evening, okay, bye guys, we'll chat another time.